My brother gave me a cheap gift for years, so I bought him the one thing he's always. I'm a 27-year-old man, and I have a younger brother who's 25. Growing up, we were close, but there was always this weird edge to our relationship, a mix of love and constant low-key competition. He's always been the quirky one in the family, and I've been the responsible one. That dynamic bled into everything we did, even our family's over-the-top birthday traditions. Let me explain. In our house, birthdays were a big deal. Everyone went all out with gifts, thoughtful, extravagant, you name it. It was almost like an unspoken contest to see who could give the most impressive present, except for my brother. His gifts to me were always underwhelming, not in a he's struggling financially kind of way. They were more like the kind of thing you'd grab from a dollar store clearance bin 5 minutes before the party started. He called it his quirky humor, and everyone else just laughed it off. I didn't. It wasn't like I was expecting diamonds or anything, but I always put effort into his gifts. One year, I saved up to get him a custom necklace with his favorite gemstone. It set me back around $200. Meanwhile, he gave me a $3 coffee mug with "I'd agree with you, but then we'd both be wrong" scrawled on it. Another time, I got him this limited edition art print he'd been raving about, and he gave me a pack of mismatched socks. It wasn't even about the money, it was the lack of thought. Every time, I smiled and said, "Thank you," but inside it was starting to sting. My parents always had an excuse for him. "He's just artistic, honey," or "that's just his way of showing love." I heard those lines so many times I could practically recite them in my sleep. The truth was, he wasn't quirky. He just didn't care enough to try. And maybe that would have been fine if he wasn't so specific about the things he wanted for himself. There's this designer watch he's obsessed with. It's $2,000. Way out of reach for most people. But he talks about it like it's his life's goal. He posts about it all the time, saves photos of it to his Pinterest boards, and even told me once that he was manifesting it. He'd say he was saving up for it, but then he'd blow his money on other stuff, concert tickets, new clothes, and gadgets he didn't need. It was like this weird running joke in our family: "Oh, that's the watch he'll never buy." This year, things changed for me. I got a huge bonus at work, a reward for months of late nights and stress. For the first time in a long time, I had money to splurge. So I decided to treat myself. I went to the mall, wandered into the fancy stores I usually avoided. And there it was, his watch. The same one he'd been dreaming about. I wasn't even planning to buy it, but something about it felt right, like a way to celebrate my hard work and finally put myself first. So I bought it. It was an impulsive decision, but the moment I walked out with that watch, I felt this weird mix of triumph and guilt. I kept telling myself it wasn't about him. I didn't buy it to spite him. I bought it because I wanted it. Still, I couldn't shake the thought of how he'd react if he found out. Fast forward to my birthday. My brother shows up late as usual and hands me his gift, a second-hand keychain. The latch was broken. He didn't even try to hide it. He laughed and said, "It reminded me of you." I didn't laugh back. I just thanked him, set it aside, and moved on with the party. But something inside me snapped. All those years of being brushed off and made to feel like I didn't matter, it was too much. The next day, I posted a picture of the watch on Instagram. Nothing dramatic. Just a casual shot of me holding it with a caption about treating myself. But I tagged him in the photo, just subtle enough to make him notice. It didn't take long. Within minutes, I got a text: "Why do you have my dream watch?" That's when everything started to spiral. Update 1. The moment the text popped up on my phone: "Why do you have my dream watch?" I knew my brother wasn't just annoyed. He was livid. Before I could even think about replying, my phone started ringing. It was him. I picked up, and he didn't even give me time to say hello. His voice was sharp, and he jumped straight into it. He wanted to know what my problem was. Why I would do something so hurtful and how I could have the audacity to buy his dream watch. I kept my voice calm and steady. I told him it wasn't about him. I bought the watch for myself because I liked it and wanted to treat myself. But that explanation didn't sit well with him. He accused me of being selfish, rubbing it in his face, and stealing something he'd been talking about for years. I reminded him that I didn't owe him anything and that he'd had plenty of time to buy it himself. The call ended abruptly, but that wasn't the end of it. Within an hour, my parents were on the phone. They had heard all about the watch situation from my brother, and they weren't happy. My mom's tone was almost apologetic at first, but it didn't take long for the guilt tripping to start. She said it looked bad for me to buy something my brother had always wanted, especially since I knew how much he cared about it. My dad chimed in, saying it wouldn't hurt to let him have it as a kind gesture. I stood my ground. I told them about all the cheap, thoughtless gifts he had given me over the years and how I'd never complained or made a big deal out of it. I pointed out how I had always gone out of my way to give him meaningful, expensive gifts, and he had never once put in the same effort for me. Their response? That's just how he is. I felt my frustration rising but stayed calm. I explained that the watch wasn't about him. It was something I bought for myself with my own money, and I didn't owe him any explanations. My parents didn't like that answer. They told me I was being stubborn and petty and that family relationships were more important than material things. Things only escalated from there. My brother started posting about it on Instagram. He didn't name me directly, but it was obvious who he was talking about. One post had a picture of the watch with the caption, "Imagine buying this just to hurt someone you're supposed to care about." Another said, "Some people really don't understand how to be a decent sibling." At first, I ignored it. I figured he'd vent and then move on. But then mutual friends started messaging me, asking why I would do something so cruel. One even sent me a screenshot of his story. He was painting himself as the victim, saying that I bought the watch out of spite to ruin his dream. I felt isolated. No one seemed to care about my side of the story. But then something unexpected happened. My coworkers started noticing the watch. A few of them complimented it, asking where I got it and saying how beautiful it was. For a brief moment, I felt a little lighter. It reminded me why I bought it in the first place, to celebrate my hard work and treat myself. But my brother wasn't done. He sent me a long text that night filled with dramatic phrases about betrayal and how he'd never forgive me for this. He ended it with something along the lines of, "I hope you're happy ruining my dream." I didn't reply. The next day, my mom called again. This time with a compromise. She suggested I give the watch to my brother as a peace offering. I could almost hear her trying to make it sound reasonable, but I wasn't having it. I told her no and that I wasn't going to reward my brother's entitlement. My dad sighed and said I was being difficult. Meanwhile, my brother doubled down on his social media posts. The passive aggressiveness turned into outright hostility. He even posted a screenshot of our text messages, carefully cropping out anything that made him look bad. He added a caption about how he was done being disrespected. More messages rolled in from mutual friends. Some were genuinely confused, asking for my side of the story. Others just told me to apologize and give him the watch to keep the peace. One friend even said I was being cruel for holding on to something that would mean the world to him. But I wasn't budging. The watch was mine. It wasn't about him, no matter how much he tried to make it seem that way. By the end of the week, I'd had enough of the drama. I blocked him on social media to stop seeing the constant posts. That didn't stop him from texting me, though. Every message was a variation of the same thing: guilt-tripping, emotional manipulation, and demands for the watch. It felt like everyone was against me, my brother, my parents, even some of our friends. But I wasn't going to cave. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first, and I wasn't going to let him take that away from me. Update 2. I didn't want to go to the family dinner. After everything that had happened, I knew it wasn't going to be a pleasant evening. But skipping it would have only added fuel to the fire, and my parents made it clear they expected me to be there. So I went, dreading every second leading up to it. When I arrived, the tension was already thick. My brother was sitting at the far end of the table, scrolling on his phone, avoiding eye contact with me. He didn't say hello or even acknowledge me, which wasn't a surprise. My parents, on the other hand, greeted me with strained smiles. It was obvious they were trying to keep things civil, but the unease was palpable. We started eating, and for a while, everyone pretended like everything was normal. Small talk about work, the weather, and my cousin's upcoming wedding filled the air, but it didn't last long. My dad set his fork down and cleared his throat. "We need to talk about this watch situation," he announced, breaking the silence. I looked up, but my brother kept his head down, stabbing at his salad. My mom gave me a pleading look, as if I was the one who needed to make this right. Right. I calmly explained again that it was my purchase, my money, and my decision. I didn't see why it required anyone else's approval. That's when my brother finally spoke up. His voice cracked, and he burst into tears. He said he'd always felt overshadowed by me. That I'd taken something he dreamed about for years just to make him feel small. He accused me of flaunting my financial success to rub his struggles in his face. He didn't hold back, listing every perceived slight I'd ever committed against him, all tied back to this one designer watch. I waited for him to finish before pointing out the facts. He'd had plenty of time to save up for the watch if it was so important to him, but instead, he'd spent his money on other things: trendy clothes, concert tickets, expensive dinners with friends. I reminded him that I had worked hard for my money and that this purchase wasn't about him at all. It was a reward for myself, and I wasn't going to apologize for that. My parents didn't like that response. They said I was being harsh and that I should consider how my actions affected my brother. My mom chimed in, saying family relationships should come before material possessions. My mom agreed, telling me to apologize and find a way to make things right. That's when I asked a question I'd been holding back for years. I asked if they had ever pressured my brother to reciprocate my thoughtful birthday gifts. I brought up the necklace, the art print, and countless other times I'd gone out of my way to make him feel special only to receive dollar store trinkets and second-hand keychains in return. My dad shifted uncomfortably, saying it was different because my brother was younger and not as financially stable. My mom added that he had a more artistic way of expressing himself, as if that excused everything. The room went silent after that. My brother stormed out, muttering something about how I was toxic and impossible to deal with. My parents didn't try to stop him. My dad just sighed and told me that I should have handled things differently. My mom shook her head, clearly disappointed. I finished my meal in silence and left as soon as I could, but the drama didn't end there. By the next morning, the rest of the family had heard about the argument. My brother wasted no time spreading his version of events, conveniently leaving out the years of one-sided gift-giving and entitlement. My phone started buzzing with messages from relatives, most of them siding with him. One cousin sent me a long message about how family should always come first and how giving him the watch could be a gesture of love that might repair the relationship. I didn't respond. Another cousin, to my surprise, said she thought I was in the right and that my brother needed to grow up. Still, the overwhelming majority painted me as the villain. I decided it was time to take a step back. I limited contact with my parents and ignored most of the messages from relatives. I needed space from the constant guilt-tripping and drama. My brother had made it clear that he wasn't interested in seeing things from my perspective, and my parents were too busy trying to keep the peace to hold him accountable. For now, I'm keeping my distance. The watch drama might have started as a small disagreement, but it's turned into something much bigger, a spotlight on years of unequal treatment and unspoken resentment. I'm not sure where things will go from here, but one thing's certain, I'm done being the only one expected to compromise. Update 3. The fallout reached a new level when my brother took the drama to the next logical place, social media. He posted a lengthy Instagram story complete with dramatic captions, carefully chosen emojis, and a curated narrative that painted me as the villain. He called me a greedy sibling who bought his dream watch out of spite and accused me of deliberately crushing his dream. There were even screenshots of text exchanges, of course cropped to make him look like the victim, and a photo of the watch with a caption about how it symbolized everything wrong with certain people. At first, I rolled my eyes and tried to brush it off, but his story started gaining traction. Friends of friends were commenting, strangers were chiming in, and before I knew it, the post had gone semi-viral within his circle. I started getting messages from random people calling me petty, selfish, and worse. Some even tagged me in their replies to his story, adding fuel to the fire. It didn't take long for the hate to get overwhelming. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications, each one a reminder of how quickly a narrative can spiral out of control. I thought about posting my side of the story, laying out the years of one-sided gift-giving, the entitled attitude, and the truth behind why I bought the watch. I even drafted a long post complete with receipts, literal and metaphorical, but I deleted it before hitting send. Feeding into the drama wouldn't solve anything. Instead, I vented to a close friend who had been following the situation from the start. She listened patiently, then gave me the best advice I'd heard in weeks: ignore the noise. She reminded me that most of the people piling on didn't know the full story and probably didn't care too. Engaging would only make things worse. So I tried to move on. I kept using the watch, refusing to let the drama dictate my choices. At work, my coworkers continued to compliment it, completely oblivious to the chaos happening behind the scenes. Those small moments of normalcy helped more than I expected. But my brother wasn't letting it go. He ramped up his campaign, pushing my parents to intervene further. They called me again, asking if I'd reconsider attending a family meeting to resolve the issue. I declined, telling them I was done explaining myself. My mom sighed, saying my refusal was only making things harder for everyone. My dad suggested I just let him have the watch to put an end to the fighting. I firmly said no and ended the call. That's when my brother tried a new tactic. He started sending me long emotional messages about how the watch reminded him of everything he's ever failed at. He painted it as a symbol of all the times he'd come up short and how it crushed him to see me with it. I didn't respond. I deleted each message as soon as it came in, refusing to engage. A mutual friend reached out, trying to mediate. She suggested my brother save up for the watch himself instead of expecting me to hand it over. When the friend relayed this suggestion, my brother's response was predictable. He claimed he couldn't afford it and deserved the watch's compensation for the emotional harm I'd caused him. The friend admitted she was frustrated with my brother's entitlement but said there wasn't much else she could do to mediate. Surprisingly, a few mutual friends started quietly expressing support for me. One sent me a private message saying she'd seen through my brother's posts and thought the whole thing was ridiculous. Another told me she'd been on the receiving end of my brother's selfishness before and wasn't surprised by his behavior. Those messages didn't erase the public hate I'd received, but they helped me feel less isolated. After yet another passive-aggressive social media post from my brother, I decided enough was enough. I blocked him on all platforms. It felt like a necessary step to protect my peace, even if it would probably escalate things further. A week later, I found out just how far my brother was willing to go. A coworker sent me a link to a GoFundMe campaign he had started titled something like "Help Me Finally Achieve My Dream." The description was as melodramatic as you'd expect, filled with vague references to a greedy sibling who had wronged him. The goal amount was $2,000, the exact price of the watch. The campaign had only raised a few $100s by the time I saw it, mostly from extended family and his friends. Some of the comments were downright ridiculous, talking about how they hoped he'd finally find happiness and overcome this cruel injustice. One relative even tagged me, writing, "I hope you're happy now." I considered reporting the campaign for spreading misinformation, but ultimately, I decided it wasn't worth the effort. Watching him resort to crowdfunding for something he could have saved for himself felt like validation in its own way. I forwarded the link to the mutual friend who had tried mediating, and her response was a mix of disbelief and laughter. For now, I'm staying out of it. If my brother wants to turn a watch into the hill he dies on, that's his choice. But I've made mine, and I'm not budging. Update 4. The GoFundMe was gaining traction, though not in the way my brother probably hoped. By the time I checked again, it had raised about $400. Most of the contributions were from our extended family with supportive comments like "keep chasing your dreams and we believe in you." It was both ridiculous and exhausting to watch. One of my coworkers sent me the link, asking if it was real. They'd stumbled across it through a friend of a friend and recognized my brother's name. The campaign's description was carefully worded, but anyone who knew the story could tell who it was about. It painted me as a privileged sibling who'd taken his dream away out of spite, though he never mentioned me by name. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or scream. On one hand, it was almost comical how far he was taking this. On the other, seeing him twist the narrative to get sympathy and money was infuriating. I considered reporting the campaign, but I decided against it. Drawing more attention to it wasn't worth it. Then, out of nowhere, my brother sent me a message. After all the blocking and ignoring, he found a way to contact me. He asked me to promote his GoFundMe on my social media to help him reach his goal. I didn't even bother responding. The sheer entitlement was beyond anything I'd seen from him before. My refusal to engage set off another wave of family drama. My parents called, asking why I couldn't just help him out. They argued that it wasn't a big deal to share the link, especially since he clearly cared so much about the watch. I told them I was done entertaining the topic. If they wanted to support him, that was their choice, but I wasn't going to be part of it. Not long after, I received a surprising message from a distant relative. They apologized for contributing to the GoFundMe and said they'd realized they were enabling my brother's behavior. They admitted that my brother had a history of making himself out to be a victim and that this situation had finally made them see it. It was a small win, but it felt significant. Despite his best efforts, the GoFundMe didn't take off the way my brother probably expected. After 2 weeks, it stalled out at just under $600. Family members who had contributed stopped sharing the link, and strangers lost interest. He deleted the campaign quietly, without fanfare or explanation. With the GoFundMe behind us, I noticed a shift in the family dynamics. Some relatives who had been firmly on my brother's side started questioning his actions. A few reached out to me, saying they hadn't realized how one-sided the situation was. My parents, however, were still firmly in his corner. They insisted that we needed to resolve things as a family and suggested therapy. I refused. I wasn't interested in sitting through sessions where I'd be painted as the bad guy for standing up for myself. My brother predictably doubled down. He told anyone who would listen that I'd ruined his life. According to him, the watch was more than just an accessory. It was a symbol of everything he'd ever wanted but couldn't have. He claimed I'd taken it away just to spite him, and now he'd never recover. Most of the family had stopped engaging by this point, but a few still gave him the validation he was looking for. Eventually, my brother stopped speaking to me altogether. At first, I expected him to come back with another angle, maybe an apology laced with guilt tripping, but nothing came. The silence was surprising, but more than that, it was peaceful. For the first time in weeks, I didn't have to deal with his constant messages, his passive-aggressive social media posts, or his drama. Without the noise, I had time to reflect on everything that had happened. The drama over the watch had been exhausting, but it also brought a lot of things to light: my brother's entitlement, my parents' enabling, and the unbalanced family dynamics. It was all out in the open now. And for the first time, I felt like I'd finally stood my ground. I kept using the watch, now more than ever. It wasn't just a purchase anymore. It was a reminder that I didn't have to put up with years of one-sided effort and guilt tripping. I could prioritize myself without feeling like I owed anyone an explanation. With my brother out of the picture, things started to settle down. I still had a strained relationship with my parents, but I kept my distance and didn't entertain any more conversations about the watch. Most of the extended family moved on, and the few who hadn't were easy enough to ignore. For the first time in weeks, I felt like the drama was finally behind me. My brother may have tried to turn a watch into a symbol of his victimhood. But in the end, it had become something much more important to me, a symbol of boundaries and self-respect. I wasn't interested in sitting through sessions where I'd be painted as the bad guy for standing up for myself. My brother predictably doubled down. He told anyone who would listen that I'd ruined his life. According to him, the watch was more than just an accessory. It was a symbol of everything he'd ever wanted but couldn't have. He claimed I'd taken it away just to spite him, and now he'd never recover. Most of the family had stopped engaging by this point, but a few still gave him the validation he was looking for. Eventually, my brother stopped speaking to me altogether. At first, I expected him to come back with another angle, maybe an apology laced with guilt tripping, but nothing came. The silence was surprising, but more than that, it was peaceful. For the first time in weeks, I didn't have to deal with his constant messages, his passive-aggressive social media posts, or his drama. Without the noise, I had time to reflect on everything that had happened. The drama over the watch had been exhausting, but it also brought a lot of things to light: my brother's entitlement, my parents' enabling, and the unbalanced family dynamics. It was all out in the open now. And for the first time, I felt like I'd finally stood my ground. I kept using the watch, now more than ever. It wasn't just a purchase anymore. It was a reminder that I didn't have to put up with years of one-sided effort and guilt tripping. I could prioritize myself without feeling like I owed anyone an explanation. With my brother out of the picture, things started to settle down. I still had a strained relationship with my parents, but I kept my distance and didn't entertain any more conversations about the watch. Most of the extended family moved on, and the few who hadn't were easy enough to ignore. For the first time in weeks, I felt like the drama was finally behind me. My brother may have tried to turn a watch into a symbol of his victimhood. But in the end, it had become something much more important to me, a symbol of boundaries and self-respect. Update 5. Months passed, and the drama over the watch seemed to fade into the background. My brother and I weren't speaking, which honestly was a relief. I had no plans to reach out, and I assumed he'd moved on to the next thing to obsess over. That's why it caught me off guard when he suddenly reached out, claiming he was ready to forgive me. The message was long, filled with his usual dramatic flair. He wrote about how much pain the situation had caused him and how he was ready to put it behind us. For his sake, of course. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. I didn't respond. I didn't block him either. I just let it sit there unanswered. A reminder of how far I'd come in not letting him manipulate me. After that, I started hearing bits and pieces through mutual friends and family. Apparently, he decided to start saving for the watch himself. He'd finally realized that no amount of guilt tripping or social media theatrics was going to make me hand it over. It was about time, honestly. For years, he'd relied on others to give him what he wanted. And this was the first time I'd seen him actually work towards something. Not long after, I saw a photo of him on Instagram. He was holding a knockoff version of the watch, posing like he'd just walked out of a high-end boutique. He didn't tag the brand or make any comments about it being a replica, but it was obvious to anyone who knew what to look for. I didn't comment or react. There was no point. Still, it was telling. Even in trying to prove a point, he couldn't let go of appearances. Meanwhile, the rest of the family seemed to be making an effort to smooth things over. A few relatives who had initially sided with him started reaching out, hinting that they realized the whole feud was unnecessary. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it felt like an olive branch. At family gatherings, they stopped bringing up the watch altogether, which was a welcome change. My parents, however, were a different story. One night, my dad called and admitted they might have handled the situation poorly. He said they'd been trying to keep the peace and hadn't realized how much they were enabling my brother's behavior. But then he pivoted, asking if I'd consider apologizing to move forward. I politely refused. I told him I wasn't holding a grudge, but I wasn't going to apologize for standing up for myself. Respect had to go both ways. Around this time, I noticed something else. The gifts I received from family members started to change. Birthdays and holidays came with thoughtful, meaningful presents, almost like they were trying to make up for years of imbalance. I didn't bring it up or ask why, but it was hard not to notice the shift. Whether it was guilt or genuine effort, I wasn't complaining. As for my brother, he eventually did buy the watch. I saw it in another Instagram post, this time, the real thing. There was no acknowledgement of the drama that had surrounded it. No nod to the months of chaos it had caused. He simply posted a photo of himself holding it, captioned with something generic like "finally." It was very on brand for him to act like the whole thing had never happened. By then, though, I didn't care. The watch had stopped being a point of contention and started being something else entirely. A reminder of why I needed to set boundaries. Every time I used it, it felt less like a luxury purchase and more like a symbol of the decision to prioritize myself. It wasn't about the money or the materialism. It was about taking back control of my life. My brother stayed distant after that, though not in a hostile way. He didn't go out of his way to avoid me, but he also didn't make an effort to reconnect. At family events, we kept things civil, sticking to surface-level conversations about work and mutual acquaintances. The dramatic outbursts and passive-aggressive comments were gone, replaced by a kind of awkward neutrality. Mutual friends also stopped bringing up the incident. It was like everyone silently agreed to let it fade into the past. No one wanted to relive the months of social media wars and family tension, least of all me. I was just glad to leave it behind. The last time I thought about the whole ordeal in any real detail was during a work trip. I was in the airport, waiting for my flight, with the watch sitting next to me. A stranger complimented it, asking where I'd gotten it. I thanked them, smiled, and gave a simple answer. It didn't cross my mind to mention the months of chaos it had caused. To me, it was just a watch again. Albeit one with a lot of history. Looking back, I'm proud of how I handled everything. It wasn't easy, but standing my ground was worth it. For the first time in a long time, I put myself first. And I didn't let guilt or drama pull me back. That, more than anything, is what I'll take away from this experience.